the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. We are proclaiming liberty one show at a time, and the next one starts right now. Hey, what's up, everybody? Clint Armitage. How's it going? This is the Liberty Podcast, and this is going to be a part 2 of the episode entitled Discarded Things. So last time I talked about how I was feeling under the weather, and God spoke to me through a sermon, through a movie, and then through a song with specific words of encouragement. Like, it touched my heart deeply. So it really confirmed again, and I already knew this, but it's just another way that God speaks directly to your heart so that you know He is there. You know He is for you, and you know that He cares about you and that you're valued. And so that was the last episode. That's what I talked about. So now this episode, I didn't get to it last time, was to talk about Psalm 139. Now in the sermon I listened to, the pastor had mentioned Psalm 139, and he gave one verse out of Psalm 139. But then I went to look up Psalm 139, and there was a bunch of stuff in there that was so good that I had to kind of talk about the whole thing. So I'm going to read through Psalm 139, and then I'm going to give a little bit of commentary on it. And also I've got some of this stuff that I'm going to talk about actually comes from the Enduring Word and their commentaries on it as well. But I'm going to kind of just translate that in this episode here. So I'm going to read through Psalm 139, and we'll see how God can speak to people, speak to you. If this is where you're at and you need some encouragement, you have to understand that there is no way that God will allow you to be undervalued or devalued or of no value. I mean, it's just not of Him. He does not work like that. He does not believe in you like that. You are 100% His child. And He made that so clear to me. And because I fail, and I failed, and I keep failing as like I said, as a father, as a husband, as a son, and understanding that, yes, I am not perfect and I am going to make mistakes. And then, but I'm just a person that beats, myself up for stuff extra hard. But because I'm more of a perfectionist, so it bothers me when I can't do things perfectly. And I understand I can't, but I still get bothered by the fact that when I don't do things in a way that meets the standard that I want, then it really gets to me. And at that point I was feeling a little bit down. And so God really, really spoke to me through those means, and He really opened my eyes and my heart and my understanding, and I got a real good sense of His love for me. Like, it was weird. That's why I had mentioned He transcended. That's why I had said that in the last episode, because that's kind of what I felt like. I felt like God came down to me. I was even lower than I normally am. Like, this is the picture. Like, I was laying on the ground and God came down all the way to me, specifically to speak to me and to help me to understand some things. And so that was really good. So I really felt like God spoke to me directly. And, hopefully He does that for you as well. Now, I know He will, but it's on our end to accept that and to understand that and to call out for it, to cry out for it, to really call out for Him in sincerity. I'm kind of babbling right now. I feel like I'm babbling, but I'm really trying to express what had happened, how He spoke to me, and He really inserted Himself in my life and in my mind and my heart so that I would understand how much I was valued to Him, And so I'm going to read through Psalm 139 because it really gives a good picture of God and us and the relationship, which it should be, right? It should be a relationship. Okay, here we go. Psalm 139, verse 1. O Lord, You have searched me and known me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You understand my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down. You are aware of all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, You know all about it, O Lord. You hem me in behind and before. You have laid Your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Okay, let's stop right there. That's the 6 verses right there, 1 through 6. Let's talk about those verses right there. Now, let me see what the commentary is on this. And it says, and it breaks it down. I'm going to talk about it because I think they did a real good job. Yeah, verses 1 through 6. And they titled that part of it is, The Greatness of God Touches My Life. It's the all-knowing God who knows me personally. So he knows you personally. So in this verse, the first part of it, you have searched me and known me. Okay, so David is praying to God, to Yahweh, and he understands. That's the one thing about David that I really, really like. He understands that God had a personal knowledge of him. With pagan gods, or how some people believe, even Christians, they believe how God is a distant God, someone that doesn't come down to you, like the picture I talked about earlier, coming down to us with personal knowledge. Well, pagans often thought that their gods were hostile or indifferent, to men and to women. And David knew that the true God cared enough to have searched and known each man and woman. And that's the thing about David, is he really had this connection. That's why, David was a man after God's own heart. It's because he had this personal knowledge of God and how it is a relationship. And so it's like this, okay? This is what Enduring Word says here. It says, it's not just that God knows everything. It's that he knows me. That's how personal it is. And that's the way our relationship should be with God, right? That personal. It's not that God is everywhere, even though he is. It's not about God being everywhere. It's about God is everywhere with me. Again, personal. So he's everywhere with you. And it's not that God created everything. He created me, and he created you. And it's a personal thing. It's the personal knowledge of God and us. So any small thoughts that we can have of God are magnificently transcended by this psalm, is what it says here. Yet for all its height and its depth, it remains intensely personal from first to last. Okay, that was another commentary by Kidner. Next verse here. You know my sitting down and my rising up. So David used this proverbial phrase to say that God knew everything about him, even the most everyday things. And that's the thing, is how is God in your life? Is he with you on daily things? Like, is he with you in the morning? And then is he with you in the afternoon? Is he with you at night? Is he with you all day? Is he your best friend? Is he there all the time? Are you talking to him all the time? And that's what these verses are talking about. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You know things because he's there all the time. You're allowing him into your life, and he's there all the time. Even though he is there anyway, you're allowing him into your life to be your best friend, to be that close connection. And then Jesus would later say in Matthew 10, God knows the number of hairs on your head. And that's how intimately God knows us. Right, next verse. You understand my thought afar off. God not only knew the smallest aspects of David's life, his everyday life, he knew his thoughts, and he knows our thoughts. He knows what we're thinking. Like I said, I personally, specifically prayed for some help with my thoughts. And then the things that he gave me through the sermon, through the movie, through the song, spoke to me personally, to my thoughts. He answered me specifically. And so just like that verse is saying, God knows us inside and out. He knows our words before we speak them. There's nothing hidden from him. He's an all-knowing God. And David says, you are acquainted with all my ways. Next verse. You have hedged me behind and before. Okay. And usually, hedge is talking about protective barrier, right? And so God has hedged David, in this case, on every side, so that nothing could come to David unless it first passed through God's permission. God has to allow things in, and all things work together for good. So even if something happens to us that appears to be negative, and if you're of a child of God and God's allowing something to happen, it's for our benefit. So we have to trust that God has our best interests in heart. And that's what David did, right? He trusted that. Even though it can be very uncomfortable, he still trusted it. And let me see here. Next verse we've got, and you laid your hand upon me. Okay, so just like with the hedge of protection there, this was an expression of God's love and care for David. Having that hand upon you, having God's hand, like when God is reaching down, like I said, we're down here and God is reaching down to us. I get that picture of when Peter was walking on the water, he took his eyes off Jesus, he started to sink. And then God came over and he reached down and pulled Peter up out of the water by his hand because he was sinking. That's kind of the picture I have of it when he says his hand is laid upon me. And it's also a protective thing as well, right? And then he says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. David David understood that God knew him better than he knew himself. God knows us better than we know ourselves. We think we know what we want. We think we know what's best for us, but no, God is the only one that knows what's best for us. So even though sometimes we reject what God is trying to get us to do, we reject what he's trying to say about us, his hand is upon us. And we got to recognize that he knows better. His knowledge is more than we know. And we've got to stop rejecting that and stop trying to avoid to do what God wants us to do. Sometimes it's tough, man. We fight against it. We do fight against it. Okay, where can I go to escape your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle by the farthest sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness is not dark to you, but the night shines like the day, and for darkness is as light to you. So where can I go to escape your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to the heavens, you are there. And God is everywhere. Like he is, again, like I said in the last podcast, he is IS, underlined, highlighted, bolded, all that. He's everywhere. So there's nowhere we can go where he can't be with us. There's nowhere we can go, nowhere we can hide that he cannot find us. No matter where we are, God is there. And so that also includes, not even physically, but also mentally. No matter where we're at mentally, God is there. Like I said, I was under the weather, but I was trying to ask God from where I was at to help me. And he was there. So it doesn't matter inside or outside. God is there. God is all around. And then in verse 12 he says, or 11 and 12, if I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light becomes night around me, even the darkness is not dark to you, but the night shines like the day, for darkness is as light to you. And like I had said before in another podcast, Jesus is light. God is light. So darkness is really nothing to God. Darkness is not even there. Darkness is as light to you, is what David says in the Psalm. Because Jesus is light, God is light. There is nothing that can overcome the light. The light overcomes darkness, like I said in the other podcast before. So you just can't get away from God. No matter how dark it is, God's light will outshine it. Will make it disappear. What happens when the sun comes up? The night goes away. What happens when you turn a light on in the darkness? The darkness goes away. It disappears. And that's just like God in your life, no matter how dark it is. Verse 13, for you formed my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and I know this very well. My frame was not hidden from you. When I was made in secret, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All my days were written in your book and ordained for me, because one of them came to be. Oh, this is good. This speaks along a couple lines here. This speaks on you being of value before, before you were even you, before you were born, you were of value. You are of value even while you were still being knit together in your mother's womb. Man, how much value is that? There is value there. And then David says, I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. God is a part of you before you are even formed yet. You're still in your mom's womb. You're still a fetus, not even a fetus, an embryo, before an embryo. You're just being knit together, and God is there. And that's why, abortion is such a big issue. I understand there's other things and variables, but you got to understand how God values every life. Marvelous are your works, and I know this very well. My frame was not hidden from you. When I was made in secret, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All my days were written in your book and ordained for me before one of them came to be. So a couple of things here. First, you notice the word here, woven. When I was made in secret, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Remember that song, Discarded Things, the song that we listened to in the last episode, where it talked about being woven together, this tapestry being woven together, beautifully woven. And this is where I see that. It really connects here because God is weaving together this beautiful tapestry of you. Before you even were, this is what he was doing. It says here, your eyes saw my unformed body. All my days were written in your book. Before the days were written in your life, they were already written in God's book. They were already ordained. Before one of them came to be, they were already there. God has been in control since the beginning. All right, now next verses. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is their sum. If I were to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. And when I awake, I am still with you. O God, that you would slay the wicked. Away from me, you bloodthirsty men, who speak of you deceitfully. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord, and detest those who rise against you? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them as my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my concerns. See if there is any offensive way in me. Lead me in the way everlasting. Here again, David starts in verse 17. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. He understands how valid God's thoughts have to be and how God thinks of him. That's why he thinks it's so precious. How vast in their sum. There is so many. If I were to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. And when I awake, I am still with you. There it is. God's precious thoughts. How vast is their sum? It says, if you were to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. Okay, go to the beach. What do you get when you go to the beach? A ton of sand. I mean, that's how many thoughts? That's just unfathomable. You can't even understand how many precious thoughts, how many good thoughts, how good God thinks of you in his thoughts. That's how many. Can you count them? You can't count them. Grains of sand. Shoot, don't even think about the whole beach. Just grab a little bit. Just scoop up a little bit. And how much is that? How many pieces of sand are in your hand there? A ton. You don't even know. We can't even count it. But that's how much God values you, is the grains of sand. That's just unfathomable. You just can't understand it. It's just too much for us to understand. And it says, oh God, that you would slay the wicked away from me, you bloodthirsty men. This is where David is asking God that he would get rid of the wicked men and the deceitfulness. And then and notice he says, do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord, and detest those who rise against you? See, it's righteous anger because it's David saying that these are enemies of God. And that's why he can speak this way, this kind of harsh language here. It's because he has this passion, because they're talking about God, they're enemies of God. It's like when Jesus was in the temple and they were selling, they were making money off of God. They were selling in the temple courts. They were selling all this stuff. And he overturned the tables of the money changers in the courts there of the temple. He said, you're making my father's house a den of thieves, because that's what it was about. People were thieving each other and in God's house. And so Jesus had this righteous anger and he overturned the tables. That's where it's stemming here for David, is this type of thing where the enemies are against God here. And so he hates them because they hate him. And that's why he says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my concerns. See if there is any offensive way in me. Lead me in the way of everlasting. And so David knew what he was talking about. He was talking about God and God's enemies, not enemies against himself, but of God here. And he had that righteous anger against them. So this was Psalm 139, and I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you understand how much God cares about you, how much you are valued by God, and how much he loves you, because Jesus died for your sins. You have to understand that. No matter what place you are, no matter how deep the depths of darkness you're in, God can shine the light, the darkness will disappear. No matter how deep you are in the ocean, the depths, God can be there and be with you. No matter how high you are in the mountains, he can be there. God can be with you at all times. Call out to him. He loves you. Thank you for listening. My name is Clint Armitage. This is the Liberty Podcast. And until next time, stay safe, stay motivated, and keep seeking liberty. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. If you want to get in touch, email us at info@clintarmitage.com.